Uh, Good morning. I'm Jeff Lowe, Chief Executive Officer of Asian Sky Group, Asian Sky Media. Here again as part of our 2020 infrastructure report. Today, I've got, and lending his insights and view on the region, or more specifically on China, I've got Paul Desgrosseilliers, who is the GM of Execujet Haite in Tianjin. Good morning, Paul.
All right, good morning, Jeff. Thank you very much for having me.
Yep. And as I mentioned, the format is we try to keep this fairly succinct, if you will. So the first question, a very easy one, if you will, what do you see are the challenges regarding infrastructure? It's a broad question and it's for the Asia Pacific region, but maybe you want to address it specifically for the China market. Where do you see the challenges facing business aviation infrastructure in China?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I think the challenges, still remain as they have for the better part of the last decade, where China still lacks FBO infrastructure. On the business jet side, I think that's really where the emphasis needs to be placed in the future. We're still at about a dozen or so FBOs in China, and that's really, there's been limited growth in the last 10 years. The MRO side is pretty well covered. There's certainly many MRO facilities throughout China, in the north and the south, operators having their own MRO 145s. So the MRO infrastructure is there, but the FBO is lacking, and that includes hangarage. There just isn't enough access to aircraft hangars. Throughout, especially when you get into remote parts of China, there's little to no access to hangars. I think this is something that's going to change in the near future, but still remains a problem.
And what about airports themselves? Yes, it's a shortage of FBOs, but if you don't have the airports, you're not going to have the FBOs either.
Yeah, look at airports. There's certainly been a movement on the airport side, but it's really commercial focused. I think this is the way the Chinese government sees the need now for aviation. There's little emphasis on the business jet side, or small GA airports. They're sprouting up, but it's really limited, small runways. So there hasn't been much growth on, say, having these business or general aviation large feeder airports that you'll see, primarily in North America for larger cities. We haven't seen that, but there's significant movement on large commercial airports, as we all know, in Beijing with the Daxing Airport opening earlier this year, late last year. And there's going to be, some pretty significant growth on the business jet side at Daxing Airport. It's been delayed because of COVID, but this should be coming online, I think, sometime next year. There's additional airports being built in Chengdu, space in Guangzhou, runways being lengthened or runways being added throughout different regions of China. So there's been significant infrastructure development on the commercial side, but unfortunately, it's not there for the business aviation feeder airports.
Well, you kind of touched on the second question, and that relates to COVID-19 and how that has impacted infrastructure, if you will. And certainly, obviously, one of those is delayed. But do you think there's been any other impact? And has COVID heightened some of these issues, as in, as you say, we don't have enough BFBOs, we don't have enough airports? Has the pandemic sort of heightened that issue where if we had those, something better would have happened? Or, what's your assessment?
Yeah, I think, it goes without saying, throughout the region in China, throughout Southeast Asia, there's been delays on some infrastructure that was scheduled to come online. That's to be expected with the pandemic. But I think we've seen some of the issues exacerbated in terms of particularly aircraft parking. As aircraft have been grounded, commercial aircraft throughout the world. In China, we've seen it at Beijing Capital Airport. It's reduced the number of parking spots and availability for business jets. There was already limited space, as we all know, in Beijing. Shanghai experienced much of the same as many major airports do in China, and limited slots because of obviously driven a lot by parking concerns. And, that's certainly been exacerbated as the commercial aircraft are taking what limited spots were available for business jets. And certainly, if there were feeder airports where business jets could be relocated, this would have certainly alleviated some of those restrictions. But, this is just not available at this time. Beijing Daxing, once that does open for business jet traffic, I think they're expecting upwards of 110 additional parking bays for business jets, 4 or 5 aircraft hangars, maybe an MRO. So this will open up at least, some availability for parking for business jets in Beijing. But this is needed throughout all of China. It's certainly not, a unique issue for just northern China. It's felt at every airport within the mainland.
Right. One of the questions we've been asking everyone is, of course, during the pandemic, certainly here in Hong Kong, the government has certainly stepped in and helped as much as they can, or as much as they perceive they need to, and those are sometimes different. And again, for you and your experience in Tianjin, how has the government stepped in and helped you?
Yeah, I think that for China, they've taken a bit of a different approach. I know in Hong Kong, with some of the work we've done at ASBA, Hong Kong has, targeted in particular airport companies, airport-related businesses for different areas of stimulus. China hasn't particularly, targeted the same, aviation companies to receive direct stimulus per se, but they've taken more of a broader economic approach. They have, made available reductions of certain types of taxes on a regional basis. So our company has benefited from some reductions on individual taxes levied on the company, and felt on the personal income tax and the proportion the company pays to the government. So there's been economic benefits on that side of it, but it isn't particularly tailored to, say, aviation. It's not my company. It's the same for its company doing business in industrial in Tianjin, and it's very, very regional. It's not broad. It's not felt throughout all of China at the same rate, but it's been focused on individual regions and what local governments can do to benefit all business.
I mean, it's sort of a sideline to that is, you obviously have your facility in Tianjin. Are you being encouraged by the government to invest more and build more, and or are they very passive when it comes to capital investment and so on and so forth?
Yeah, the government here has always been very proactive in dealing with businesses. And I think that's why the airport area, the free trade zone, all of the businesses on both sides of the airport have grown as much and as they have, and the investment has been made at Tianjin Airport in the last 10, 15 years because the government is very active in the community. I think maybe about 3 months ago, we actually, the government organized a meeting as soon as we were able to with the pandemic situation.
Right.
All company general managers and senior managers were brought together to collaborate and to introduce ideas to the government, to the local government, for them to act upon, to express concerns that they have with their businesses, and to even network, to find opportunities for us to work together.
No, great initiative by them. Yeah,
it really is, and it's bared some fruit. The government has several initiatives that were introduced to them at that time, and they are working through it. We find the government here just extremely effective. They do listen to us. They regularly engage with us, and I think this is why many of the businesses here that are located in the free trade zone or on the outskirts of the airport, I think this is, why many of them have proven successful, because the government does support them, not only, to land that initial investment, but to also make sure and ensure that there's, long-term success and growth of companies and people. And I think it's just a real win-win situation for everybody involved.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask you to get out that crystal ball And I know, very challenging, very difficult
Yeah.
to do that. Most of us can't see past the next 6 months. But if you take a look at China and the infrastructure of the industry, I mean, I guess, where do you think that will be in 2 or 3 years, 5 years, in China? And again, relating to the infrastructure side of things. I mean, you mentioned that some additional airports are coming online and there'll be additional MRO, but it may not bring that blossoming of FBOs that you hope for over the next 5 years, for instance.
Yeah, I think that certainly in the near term, there will be that initial wave that we're seeing, the construction that's nearing completion
Right.
in Beijing. In Guangzhou, there's been a lot of activity. I do think there's going to be some activity in Shenzhen. Zhuhai, has been active for, many years.
Yep.
I think we're going to see this in the near term. I think long term, we started to see, I think late last year, CAC taking a more active approach in identifying and getting involved in FBO development, identifying some of the issues that exist out there. And, there's been some papers that I've seen written about the subject. And, I think this is really the first step in China of them identifying a problem. And then, it takes time.
That's how they go about it, step by
Yes.
step.
Right. So I think long term, there will be movement. There will be development. I think, there will be private enterprises allowed to open up FBO facilities throughout China. I think you'll start at smaller airports. I know there's some discussion now about that maybe happening in the short term, where they'll look at some case studies and allow some private enterprises to open some smaller FBOs at some of the second and third tier cities. I think this will be this first step. And then I think, long term, we could see a second or third FBO at a major airport, which would be a huge step forward in allowing competitive
I was
forces.
going to say, maintaining competitiveness. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So I think long term, we will see that. But, things take time here. It's not going to happen overnight. We're looking 5 years and beyond.
I was going to say, stay tuned for the next 5-year plan and see what's in it.
No question.
Yeah. Okay, great, Paul. I'm not going to take any more of your time. Really appreciate you getting on the line with us again today.
Thanks,
so
Jeff.
please, thanks and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Enjoy.
Yep.